Today we find out, is the XSR900 a good beginner motorcycle? So I already know what some of you are going to say. Some of you are going to say XSR900, way too much power, way too much displacement for a beginner rider. And that's just not true. So for my primary occupation, I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but during that course of employment, I do work with NHTSA as well as NTSB very often. And I look at a lot of their studies, including motorcycle fatalities and collisions. And displacement, there is a correlation between the displacement of the engine and the elevated risk or likelihood of a fatality. However, it's not in the way you would think, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. If you haven't already, hit that like, hit that subscribe. If you need anything from Kelpie Custom Moto, use my coupon code. It's Ride with Kai, same as my YouTube handle. It's the only coupon code for Kelpie Custom Moto, 5% off site-wide. So I've got a NHTSA study here in front of me, and I want to read some key statistics out of this study. First one, 36% of motorcycle riders involved in fatal crashes, no motorcycle license. So over a third, no on one. 43% of motorcycle riders who died in single vehicle collisions, alcohol impaired. So almost half had alcohol on board. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at engine displacement. I recently looked at a NHTSA study for work that included fatal motorcycle collisions. It took data from 2021, okay? And this is what it said. It said motorcycle collisions on bikes from 0 cc's up to 1,000 cc's, okay? When you think of a fast bike, what do you think of? S1000RR, Ninja H2, CBR 600, CBR 1000, Panigale V2, etc. All those super fast motorcycles that are in your mind right now, that would be included in this 0 to 1,000 cc category of fatal motorcycle collisions. By percentage, fatal motorcycle collisions for that group, 43%. The next group, 1,001 cc's and higher. So what do you think that would include? That's going to be your Harleys, your Goldwings, all these motorcycles that have big displacement but are very slow. Okay, with the exception of a few, right? RSV4, Panigale V4, those are 1100s. Those will be included in this next category, but those are the exception. The vast majority are going to be cruisers that are slow, right? By percentage, 50% of fatalities involved a motorcycle with a displacement larger than 1,001 cc's, okay? And the remaining percentage, those were collisions that had an unknown motorcycle displacement, okay? So what does that tell you? It's not totally clear that the speed capability of a motorcycle has anything to do with if it's more dangerous or more fatal to ride. Anyways, back to the XSR. Whew, that Kelpie exhaust. So this next part of the video, I wanted to do it while riding. So here we are, we're just on a residential street here. The speed limit is either gonna be 25 or 30 miles an hour. Let's play it on the safe side, and let's say it's 25. Okay, look at this. We can go 25, 26 miles an hour, no problem. You don't need to go 100 miles an hour everywhere. Unlike what the internet will tell you, this bike will only go as fast as you tell it to go. That is it. So there's no reason why a beginner rider who is responsible, you know, again, to ride a motorcycle, any motorcycle, you should be responsible anyway. But there's no reason why a responsible person couldn't start riding on one of these bikes. It's light, it has good suspension, it has good brakes, it has good electronics package, the engine is torquey.
And that torque, it doesn't need to be, that torque and horsepower doesn't need to be used to just go super fast. That's not what it needs to be for. So in a beginner rider context, let's say I need to make a pass here, okay? I don't need to think about shifting down. I don't need to think about being in the right RPM or any of that stuff. I don't need to think about clutch or anything because it has a quick shifter, right? So if I need to make a pass, let's say that there's, you know, a car in front of me, I feel like it'd be safer if I were to move around them. All I can do is just this, right? Signal, switch lanes, give it some power. That's it, and I'm in front of them, right? Whereas on a small beginner motorcycle, a 400cc, a 250cc, something like that, you would not be able to do that. If you need to make a pass, it's this. And then you're making a pass. Okay, so you tell me, for a beginner rider who is supposed to be concentrating on the traffic conditions around them and just learning how to ride, what do you think's better? This or this? Right? Kind of enough said there. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. And when I had my Husqvarna 401, that was something that really annoyed me, was it would take a long time to just do normal traffic maneuvers because the bike has so little power, right? So I got to shift down, even though that bike had a quick shifter anyway, which made it easier. But even with the quick shifter, I'm going from fifth to fourth to third to second just to get around somebody, right? Whereas if you have a more powerful motorcycle like this, you don't need to do that, which is safer for a beginner. Also, when you buy one of these bikes, if you buy an XSR900, you know that you're going to be keeping it for some time. You're not going to get bored of it. You're not going to get tired of it. You're not going to feel like, I'm going to need something with more power in 6 months to a year. Whereas if you bought an R3, a Ninja 400, something like that, you're probably going to be thinking about it pretty quickly, right? And if you look at any motorcycle dealership, the used section, what bikes are there? A lot of 400s, a lot of 500s, a lot of these small beginner motorcycles that are a year old, sometimes less than a year old. Well, what do you think happened there? Right? And that beginner rider just lost a bunch of money on that, right? So you buy a brand new Ninja 400, okay, you see, I don't know what the MSRP is on those bikes, but probably 5,000 or 5,500, okay. So not that much, not too much money, but what people don't consider is you got tax, you've got registration, you've got freight, you've got dealer prep, you've got document fees, you got all these other fees on top. So that $5,500 bike, by the time you leave the dealership, is more like $7,300, sometimes more, okay? If you trade that bike in a year, 6 months, okay? Let's say you get the full MSRP back. It's a miracle. You get the full $5,500 back for the MSRP, okay? You still lost $2,000 in taxes and other fees, right? And now you're, in that short amount of time, you lost all that money when you're already a responsible rider. You know you're a responsible person. Maybe you've already had some fast cars in the past. So you lost all that money for basically nothing, right? When you could have just started on something like this and not had to worry about that. Let's hop off and bring attention to the seat height here. So on the 2022 and newer XSRs, they have a very low seat height. It's actually 31.9 inches. So for a beginner rider, that's a great seat height. If you compare it to some of the super sports and stuff like that, that really tall seat is difficult for beginners to deal with. That's something that as a new rider, I actually struggled with, was the actual seat height. It was hard to get confidence when your feet can barely touch the ground. So on my Panigale V2, for example, I can basically 1 foot kind of scoop my butt over and get the ball of my foot down pretty much. I can't really get both toes down. So with a bike like this, you know, 31.9 inch seat height makes beginners a lot more comfortable. Now, if you get a prior generation XSR900, the seat height is much higher. It's actually 32.7. So take that into consideration if you're thinking about buying one of these bikes if you're a beginner.
And what's more important than the horsepower to a responsible new rider is the weight. These XSR 900s are pretty light. They're around 420 pounds or so. They're easy to get into the low 400s with an exhaust and some other small modifications. So it's easier to get confident, especially low speed, when you're not dealing with a heavy motorcycle. So what about reliability? Okay, of course we know Yamaha is known for making very quality, very reliable motorcycles. With this particular example, at least from what I've seen, working on it, taking it apart, modifying it, that seems to be true here, right? So on my Husqvarna, for example, I have no idea how many fasteners I found that were just stripped from the factory, missing. My Aprilia, I've found at least one bolt. No, I found 2 bolts that were missing. So, not to say that those bikes are bad, but with this Yamaha, I have yet to find anything like that. Everything is torqued down properly. None of the bolts have been cross-threaded or anything like that. The fastener quality seems to be good as well. So I think it's fair to say that in the near and distant future, things are going to be pretty reliable, which is what Yamaha is known for. It's just got good quality. For a beginner rider, that's super important, right? As a new rider, you want to be enjoying it. You want to be figuring out if you even like riding. You don't want to spend time fixing the bike, always at the dealership, always have some type of recall. I know some people will say, well, the bike's under warranty, so the dealership will fix it. Well, yes, that's true. I understand that. However, it's still not fun to have that done, right? The dealership, they'll fix it for free. It's under warranty. Well, yes, but there's also time involved, right? They may not be able to get the part for a while, right? Depending on what it is. You've got to have somebody drop you off there, pick you up there. You've got to call the dealership, tell them what's going on. They may even tell you, well, I don't know if it's covered under warranty or not. You may have to provide additional information, right? So it's better if you just don't have to deal with that stuff at all in the first place. And if you buy a bike that has a lot of those issues, then it's going to take some of that fun away. It's going to be not so fun to ride. If you think about it, riding's kind of a commitment anyway. You've got to pay attention to the weather. You've got to have all your gear ready in the morning. You've got to make sure that you don't need to make any stops on the way home that would require you to carry a bunch of stuff, right? Wherever you're going, if you're picking something up, will it fit in your backpack, right? Or if you have saddlebags, I guess that too, but you can't hold much in there. You can't go to Costco with your motorcycle, right? So it requires a lot of planning ahead. It requires a lot of time anyway. And the last thing you want to do is spend even more time doing maintenance all the time, dealing with recalls, dealing with warranty fixes. As a new rider, you don't want to have to deal with that. And with the XSR 900, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And before I forget, this is what the maintenance is like on one of these bikes. The oil filter is literally right there, and there's the drain plug. Chain adjustments, very simple. It's just like, most other motorcycles out there. It doesn't have a single side swing arm with a, like the cam type chain adjuster. It's just very easy to work on. Now for beginners, you also want to be visible also. So you have full LED headlight, LED turn signals, LED tail light as well. So this bike is quite visible at night. It's not like it's got some old school, halogen bulbs in there or anything like that. It's a very visible motorcycle, which again is important for beginners. Okay, so where does that leave us, you guys? So we have this lightweight, reliable, fun to ride motorcycle, plenty of power, but also reasonable to insure, very reasonable to maintain, including being able to do that maintenance yourself. Easy to modify, and the parts for this bike are not expensive either. The good thing is they have quality parts for these bikes that are not expensive, right? You can find motorcycle parts for cheap, of course, right? You can get stuff off of Alibaba and Temu and all that stuff, but the difference here is these bikes have plenty of quality parts available, but they're not outrageous. And for a beginner bike, for a beginner rider, that's important as well. You want them to be able to have the full experience. You want them to be able to modify their motorcycle, make it their own, without spending a ton of money, and still also ending up with a high quality part, a part that's going to be safe, is going to last, they're not going to be disappointed with, right? And you're going to get that with this bike. So the power is usable, you can go through all the gears, but you're also not going to get bored with it. You're not going to end up trading it in 6 months, losing a bunch of money on it, which
You know, again, for a beginner rider, how is that fun? How is that fun for a beginner rider? How is that going to make somebody want to ride more, right? It just won't. You know, it's got quick shift up and down, adjustable suspension. My goal here is to show you guys that you can get the full motorcycle experience by buying one of these bikes and be completely safe, okay? And again, I'll emphasize, if you know that you are an irresponsible person, you can't control yourself, you know you're gonna just, you know, test the performance of any machine that you get your hands on, then motorcycling is probably just not for you, right? I mean, I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm not somebody who, you know, likes to tell people what to do, but if that's you, then, you know, I don't think the problem is the motorcycle itself, it's you, right? So, you know, is this the best beginner bike ever? You know, couldn't really tell you. It's going to just depend on what you're looking for on a beginner bike. But the original question was, is this bike appropriate for a beginner? Can a beginner ride this bike? Can this be their first motorcycle? And my answer is absolutely, this can be your first motorcycle, without question. Without question. This is a great first motorcycle. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having this as your first bike. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. You have basic knowledge of how you should handle a high performance machine, then don't let anybody tell you that this is just way too crazy for you. You need to start on a 250 and then get a 650 and then get a 900, and then if you want, get a liter bike, right? You have this slow progression over 5 years, you can finally get the bike you want. Don't let somebody do that to you. Okay, and as you guys see here, the bike's super nimble, clutch is very light, it's very comfortable. I mean, I could, even with the clip-ons, I could ride this bike all day long, no problem.
Got back to the garage safely, so I want to tell you guys a little story, and I think this is an important one for those beginners out there. This motorcycle is owned by a beginner rider. It's his first bike, it's a brand new bike. So for their first service, he wanted to have a Yamaha dealership perform it. Totally get it, totally understand. Didn't want to worry about warranty or anything like that. He wanted to have the dealership service the bike for the first time. No problem. Call around, first dealership says, hey, first service, $380. These are the items that we're gonna cover as part of that service, okay? Call the next dealership, $280 for a first service on one of these bikes, and these are the items that we're going to cover as part of that service. For both dealerships, the items were the same. So it was the same product, same service, but a little bit of a cost difference there. So we go to the cheaper dealership, okay, no problem. Get the motorcycle back. Owner says, you know what, the transmission feels kind of weird. I don't think it's shifting the way that it used to shift. It feels like it's not shifting right. And me just looking at the chain tension, I could tell that it was way too tight. So when the motorcycle was loaded up, when the rider was on the bike, and the rider of this motorcycle, the owner, is not a heavy guy at all. There was basically zero slack in that chain. It was super tight, and it was so tight that it was affecting the way that the bike shifted. So what ended up happening was the dealership actually used the prior generation XSR900 chain tension and not this current generation XSR900 chain spec. So what does that tell you as a beginner? It tells you that just because a dealer does the service, and I'm not trying to bash the dealer or the technician, because things happen, nobody's perfect, everybody makes mistakes. But what it tells you is that just because you get a service done at the dealership doesn't mean it's done correctly. And it tells you that you should be trying to do a lot of the maintenance on your own. That way you know it's done correct. So where are we with the XSR900? Is it an appropriate choice for a beginner rider? If you're responsible as a motorcycle rider, we all should be. Absolutely, it's an appropriate choice. There's many situations where having that little extra power is actually safer for you. I gave some examples earlier, but I'm gonna give you another example now. So let's say you're riding, you're approaching an intersection with a stoplight, it's green, and it phases to yellow as you approach. you got traffic behind you, or maybe you're not sure there's traffic behind you, okay? What do you think's safer? Putting on a little speed, 5, 8, 10 miles an hour to get through that intersection, or abruptly stopping in front of traffic, right? Every situation is gonna be a little bit different. We're not gonna talk in absolutes here, but generally, it's probably gonna be safer for you to move through that intersection and put on a little bit of speed, right? No need to put on 50 miles an hour or anything like that, but 8, 10 miles an hour just to get through that intersection. On a bike like an XSR900, all you need to do, you don't need to shift down or anything. You can leave it in 5th gear at 50 miles an hour or whatever the speed is, squeeze on that throttle 20, 30%, and you're going to gain 8, 10 miles an hour quickly and get you to that intersection. If you're on a really slow motorcycle, a bike with 30, 40 horsepower, you're gonna be shifting down a few gears, probably 5th to 4th to 3rd, maybe to 2nd, and that throttle is gonna be almost wide open. You're gonna be 60, 80, maybe 100% throttle to get through that intersection. So let's go back to our example earlier about trading in a motorcycle. So you buy in the example earlier, we said, okay, hey, let's buy a new Ninja 400. You trade it in 6 months to a year later. You're gonna lose a bunch of money on that. So I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, well then you should have just bought a used motorcycle. Okay, well that makes sense too. However, if you're a beginner rider, do you know what a good used motorcycle looks like? Do you know what to check? Do you know what you're looking at? Probably not, right? And even if you do, let's say you did get a good used beginner motorcycle. Let's say you got a good Ninja 400, it's a year old, great condition. You're still gonna lose money on that if you ride it for 6 months to a year or whatever, because in most states, you're still paying sales tax on that, right? Unless you're gonna lie about it and not pay the tax, right? You still have to pay license, you still have to pay title transfer, you still have to deal with trying to find a nice example of a used bike, and then when you go to sell it, you have to spend time posting it on Craigslist or Cycle Trader or whatever it's gonna be, which if it's, well, actually Craigslist too, but especially Cycle Trader, it costs money to post there, right? And you've got to deal with all the tire kickers and potential buyers and stuff like that. You're gonna waste a ton of time doing that when, if you're responsible, you could have just started on the bike that you really wanted in the first place. So that's my take on the XSR900 as a beginner motorcycle. Whether you agree or disagree, put it in the comment section. We'll talk about it. We'll all learn together. Constructive conversation is always a good thing. And if you haven't already, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, use the Kelpie Custom Moto coupon code. Hope the video today was helpful. We'll see you guys next time.